Remember that classic orange truck that Rick Simon drove around San Diego, solving crimes and getting into trouble with his brother AJ? That 1979 Dodge Power Wagon became as much a character on the show as the brothers themselves. But here's the thing. Almost everything you thought you knew about that truck was television magic. The vehicle that seemed so consistent, so reliable, so unmistakably Rick's was actually a collection of automotive smoke and mirrors that would make any car enthusiast's head spin. Today we're counting down 20 weird facts about Rick's Power Wagon that'll completely change how you watch those classic Simon & Simon reruns. And trust me, once you know these behind-the-scenes secrets, you'll never look at that orange truck the same way again. So buckle up, because this ride through television history is about to get bumpy. Number 20. It wasn't actually a 1979 model. Here's where the deception starts. That iconic truck everyone calls Rick's 1979 Dodge Power Wagon. Not actually from 1979. The production team used multiple late 70s Dodge W150 trucks that they dressed up to look identical. Some were from 77, others from 78. A few might have actually been from 79. But they mixed and matched parts so often that creating one consistent model year became impossible. The prop department would grab whatever Dodge truck they could find in the right price range, slap on some orange paint, add the signature accessories, and suddenly, it became Rick's truck. This wasn't unusual for television productions in the 80s. Shows rarely had the budget for multiple identical vehicles, so they'd buy whatever was available and cheap, then work their magic to make them look the same on camera. The average viewer watching on their wood-grain television set in 1981 couldn't tell the difference between a 77 and a 79 Dodge anyway. But freeze frame the episodes today on high-definition screens, and you'll spot the telltale differences. The grille patterns change slightly, the side marker lights move positions, even the dashboard layouts differ between episodes. It's like Rick's truck existed in some weird automotive multiverse where model years meant nothing. Number 19. The lift height changed. Between episodes. Watch Simon & Simon episodes back to back and you'll notice something strange. Rick's Power Wagon seems to grow and shrink like Alice in Wonderland. One episode it towers over regular cars, the next episode is barely taller than AJ's convertible. This wasn't your imagination playing tricks. Different stunt trucks had varying suspension setups depending on what the scene required. Need to film a high-speed chase on city streets, use the lower truck for better stability, shooting an off-road scene in the desert, bring in the lifted version for ground clearance. The production had at least 3 different suspension heights among their fleet of power wagons. The hero truck used for close-ups and dialogue scenes had a moderate lift. The stunt truck for jumps had heavy-duty suspension that sat higher. And the city driving truck stayed closer to stock height for easier handling. Sometimes they'd even adjust the suspension between takes. A truck that started the day sitting tall might end the shoot, riding low after the crew let air out of the tires or adjusted the leaf springs. The continuity department probably had nightmares trying to match shots, but most viewers were too caught up in the action to notice Rick's truck mysteriously gaining or losing 3 inches of height between commercial breaks. Number 18. The roll bar was mostly cosmetic. That chrome roll bar with the KC lights mounted on top, the one that screamed tough guy and made Rick's truck instantly recognizable, mostly for show. It wasn't a structural roll cage designed to protect occupants during a rollover. It was basically a shiny prop bolted to the bed for visual impact. Real roll cages need to be integrated into the vehicle's frame with proper mounting points and reinforcement. They're built from DOM tubing with specific wall thicknesses to handle crushing forces. Rick's roll bar was more like patio furniture welded to look tough. The prop department knew it only needed to hold up some lights and look good on camera. In fact, during actual stunt work involving potential rollovers, the production used completely different trucks with proper safety equipment installed. The cosmetic roll bar would have crumpled like tin foil in a real accident, but it photographed beautifully. That chrome caught the California sunlight just right. It gave the truck an aggressive profile that perfectly matched Rick's character. And most importantly, it provided a mounting point for those iconic KC lights that became part of the truck's signature look. Sometimes television magic is more about appearance than function. Number 17. The KC lights rarely worked. Speaking of those KC lights mounted on the roll bar, here's a dirty little secret. Most of the time, they were about as functional as Christmas ornaments. The production wired them just enough to glow for close-up shots, but they rarely provided actual illumination. Think about it from a filming perspective. Real off-road lights are insanely bright. They'd blow out the cameras and create harsh shadows that would ruin the shot. So, the prop department installed lower wattage bulbs or sometimes just empty housings with small accent lights inside. When you see the lights on during night scenes, the actual illumination came from massive Hollywood lighting rigs positioned off-camera. The KC lights were just there to sell the illusion. Sometimes they weren't even connected to anything. Crew members would occasionally forget to wire them up after transport, and nobody would notice until they reviewed the dailies. There's at least one episode where sharp-eyed viewers can spot the lights being on with no visible wiring running to them. The few times they needed the lights to actually function for a specific shot, the electrical department would temporarily wire in proper bulbs, then immediately disconnect them afterwards to prevent accidental activation that might ruin other scenes. Number 16. The truck swapped engines. Often, Rick's Power Wagon supposedly had the same engine throughout the series, but under the hood, it was like automotive musical chairs. The production truck cycled through various LA Series V8s depending on what was available, what was running, and what had blown up during the last stunt sequence. They had 3 18 engines, 3 60 engines, and even a 400 cubic inch big block that made appearances. When one engine started smoking or knocking, they'd swap in whatever was ready. The beauty of Dodge's LA Series engines was their interchangeability. A 318, 360, and 400 could all bolt into the same engine bay using the same motor mounts. To the camera, they looked identical, but the performance differences were noticeable during filming. Stunt drivers had to constantly adjust their driving style based on which engine was under the hood that day. The 318 trucks were dogs struggling during chase scenes. The 400-powered truck would chirp the tires just looking at the accelerator. Directors loved the big block truck for burnout scenes, but hated it for precise maneuvers. You can actually hear the difference if you pay attention to the engine sounds between episodes. Though usually, the sound department dubbed over everything with the same stock V8 sound effect anyway. Number 15. The tires were constantly replaced. Television trucks live hard lives, and Rick's Power Wagon was no exception. Between burnouts, off-road adventures, and sliding around corners during chase scenes, the production burned through tires. Like Rick burned through relationships, they were replacing rubber weekly, sometimes daily, during heavy stunt shoots. The truck used different tire types depending on the filming location. Street scenes got highway tires for better handling on pavement. Desert shoots required aggressive off-road treads. Wet weather scenes needed something with decent water channeling. The prop department kept a rotating inventory of pre-mounted wheels ready to swap. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't always match the tires exactly. Budget constraints meant buying whatever was on sale or available in bulk, so the truck might have BF Goodrich all-terrains on Monday and Goodyear Wranglers on Tuesday. Sometimes they'd run mismatched brands on the same truck if they were running low on inventory. The worn-out tires didn't go to waste, though. The effects department loved them for explosion scenes. Nothing makes a better fireball than a stack of old rubber, and the stunt department would keep the partially worn tires for scenes requiring less traction, making slides and spins easier to execute. Number 14. The truck sometimes had mismatched wheels. If you freeze frame certain chase scenes, you'll spot something the editors hoped you wouldn't notice. Different wheels on the same truck, not just tires, but completely different rim styles. The production had a collection of wheels that were close enough for television work. Some were chrome wagon wheels, others were white painted Steelies. A few were aftermarket aluminum slots. During fast-paced action sequences, they'd use whatever combination was mounted and ready. The theory was simple. If the truck's moving fast enough, nobody will notice the rear wheels don't match the front, or that the spare tire mounted in the bed has a completely different rim than the four on the ground. They were usually right. Standard definition television and quick editing hid most of these inconsistencies, but occasionally, a continuity error would slip through. There's one episode where the truck clearly has chrome wheels in the establishing shot, white wheels during the chase, and black wheels when it slides to a stop. The prop department's motto seemed to be, good enough for television. And honestly, they were right. Most viewers were watching on 19-inch screens from across the living room. They cared more about Rick catching the bad guys than whether his wheels matched. Number 13. The interior wasn't show accurate. The inside of Rick's truck was like a magician's cabinet, different every time you looked inside depending on what the scene needed. The hero truck used for dialogue scenes had a complete interior with nice seats, full door panels, and a decent dashboard. But the stunt trucks? stripped down like race cars. They'd pull out everything that wasn't bolted down and quite a few things that were. No door panels, racing seats instead of stock benches, sometimes just a bare metal dashboard with the essential gauges. The reasoning was practical. Stunt drivers needed better seats with proper support. Extra interior pieces could become projectiles during hard impacts. And weight reduction improved performance for jumps and high-speed work. But this created continuity nightmares. Rick would get into a truck with a brown bench seat, cut to the chase scene with black racing buckets, then arrive at the destination back in the brown bench. The sound department had to add door slam sounds in post-production because the stripped stunt truck's doors sounded like tin cans. They'd also dub in seat spring noises that the racing seats didn't make. Even the steering wheels changed between trucks. The hero truck had a stock wheel, while stunt trucks often had smaller aftermarket wheels for quicker steering response. Number 12. Many shots. Use a different color truck, that iconic orange paint job. Not always orange, not even always the same. Shade of orange when it was. Depending on the lighting, the dust, the film stock, and which truck they were using, Rick's Power Wagon could appear anywhere, from bright safety orange to deep copper red. The production started with multiple trucks in slightly different shades. Paint mixing wasn't as precise in the early 80s, and they sourced paint from different suppliers. What looked like matching orange in the shop looked completely different under California sunshine. Then there was the dust factor. Desert filming coated everything in a fine layer of brown that shifted the color toward red. Beach shoots added salt spray that dulled the finish. City filming picked up smog residue that gave the truck a grayish tint. They'd try to wash the trucks between scenes, but tight schedules often meant filming with whatever color nature had added that day. Some episodes were shot weeks apart but edited together, so you'd see a clean, bright orange truck in one scene cut to a dusty, copper-colored truck in the next. The worst was when they needed quick repairs. The body shop would mix paint by eye, resulting in patches that photographed completely different colors. There's one episode where the passenger door is noticeably redder than the rest of the truck after accident repairs. Number 11. The Toolbox appeared and disappeared. That diamond plate toolbox mounted in the truck bed, it had a magic trick worthy of Houdini. It would appear and disappear between scenes like it was controlled by a switch. One shot, Rick's hauling cargo with no toolbox. Next shot, the toolbox is there. Cut to a wide angle, gone again. This wasn't poor continuity, it was practical production needs. Different trucks had different bed configurations. Some had the toolbox permanently mounted, others had clean beds for hauling equipment or stunts, and at least one truck had a fake toolbox that was just a hollow shell for appearance. The toolbox created problems for certain shots, it blocked camera angles for bed-mounted shoots, it got in the way during fight scenes, it could become a projectile during jumps. So the crew would remove it when needed. The funny thing is, they never established what Rick kept in that toolbox. In 5 seasons, he might have opened it twice. It was purely aesthetic, adding to the working man vibe of the truck. Like everything else on the Power Wagon, the toolbox served the story when needed and vanished when it didn't. Television magic at its finest. Number 10. Chrome. Trim changed unexpectedly. The amount of chrome on Rick's truck seemed to follow some mysterious Hollywood logic that changed from episode to episode. Side trim would appear and disappear. Mirror styles would swap from chrome to black. Bumper guards would materialize out of nowhere. Running boards would vanish between commercial breaks. This wasn't intentional. The production's fleet of trucks came with different trim packages, and parts would get damaged, stolen, or borrowed for other vehicles. When a chrome piece got damaged during a stunt, they'd either replace it with whatever was available or just leave it off entirely. The prop department had boxes of random Dodge truck trim pieces scavenged from junkyards. They'd bolt on whatever somewhat matched when something was missing. Chrome mirrors might get swapped for black ones from a parts store. Bent bumpers might lose their guards permanently. There's one episode where the truck starts with full chrome rocker panel trim, loses half of it during a chase scene, presumably from damage, and then has completely different trim by the final scene. They probably grabbed parts from another truck during lunch. The chrome also aged differently on each truck. California sun and salt air turned some pieces golden while others stayed bright. This gave each truck a slightly different personality that sharp-eyed viewers can spot throughout the series. Number 9. The Power Wagon. Often outran sports cars. Here's where Hollywood physics took over completely. Rick's Power Wagon, which in reality had maybe 200 horsepower on a good day, and the aerodynamics of a brick, regularly outran Corvettes, Porsches, and muscle cars in chase scenes. The truck that should have topped out at 85 miles per hour was keeping pace with vehicles capable of twice that speed. The secret? creative filming, and editing. They'd film the Power Wagon at 30 miles per hour, then speed up the footage. Meanwhile, the sports cars were actually driving slower than normal to let the truck keep up. Camera angles made everything look faster than reality. Low angles, tight zooms, and quick cuts created the illusion of speed. The sound department added screaming engine noises that no Dodge truck ever made. They dub in sounds from actual race cars, then pitch them down slightly to seem more truck-like. Sometimes they'd film the vehicles separately and edit them together to appear in the same chase. The Power Wagon might be filmed on Tuesday going 40 miles per hour, while the pursuing Ferrari was filmed Thursday going 90, cut them together right, add some tire squeals, and suddenly Rick's keeping pace with Italian engineering. Stunt coordinators became masters of making slow look fast. They'd wet down streets so 30 miles per hour slides look like 60 miles per hour drifts. Number 8, its horn sound. Wasn't real. Every time Rick honked that horn, what you heard had nothing to do with what was actually installed in the truck. The production dubbed in a deeper, more cinematic horn sound that could cut through any audio mix and grab viewer attention. The real horns on the trucks were typical Chrysler products from the late 70s. Adequate, but not particularly impressive. They sounded tinny and weak, especially when picked up by boom mics from a distance. So the sound department created the perfect truck horn in post-production. They layered multiple horn recordings, added some low-frequency enhancement, and created a signature sound that became part of Rick's character. This dubbed horn was so much better than reality that it created problems on set. Actors would react to the actual horn during filming, which sounded nothing like what viewers would eventually hear. Directors had to remind guest stars to really sell their startled reactions to what was essentially a weak meep that would later become a mighty honk in post. There are behind-the-scenes stories of the prop department trying to install air horns to match the dubbed sound, but they were too loud for dialogue scenes and kept draining the truck's electrical system. Number 7, the truck endured jumps it shouldn't survive. Rick's Power Wagon took more air than a skateboarding teenager and somehow kept running. In reality, those jumps should have turned the truck into scrap metal. We're talking about a heavy-duty truck with 1970s suspension technology, launching off ramps and landing hard enough to compress the springs to the bump stops. After every significant jump, stunt trucks needed major repairs or replacement. Frames would bend, suspensions would collapse, transmissions would crack their cases, radiators would explode from the impact, oil pans would get crushed, drive shafts would pretzel. The production burned through trucks like stunt performers burned through aspirin. They kept a steady rotation of replacement vehicles because they knew each jump meant another truck headed to the scrapyard or at least the repair bay. What viewers saw as one continuous chase was actually multiple trucks, filmed over several days. Jump number 1 might total truck A. Cut to a reaction shot while they bring in truck B. Jump number 2 destroys truck B's suspension. Cut to interior dialogue while truck C arrives. By the end of a big action episode, they might have used 4 different trucks to create one chase sequence. The medical bills for the stunt drivers were probably smaller than the mechanical bills for the trucks. Number 6, the rear suspension. Visibly sags. Sometimes pay attention to the rear of Rick's truck during different scenes, and you'll notice it riding like a low rider in some shots. The bed would be sitting level, then suddenly drop 4 inches like it was carrying invisible lead. This wasn't a continuity error, it was the weight of Hollywood production equipment. Camera rigs, especially the stabilized platforms used for driving shots, were heavy. We're talking hundreds of pounds of metal framework, cameras, and operators. The poor leaf springs on those Dodges weren't designed for that kind of load. Add in generators, lighting equipment, and sound gear, and the truck was basically a rolling production studio. The sagging got worse over time as the leaf springs lost their memory from constant overloading. The prop department would occasionally install helper springs or air shocks to level things out. But those were temporary fixes that often failed mid-shoot. There's one episode where you can actually see the truck's stance change during a single scene. It starts level, then progressively sags as they apparently loaded more equipment during takes. By the final shot, the rear bumper is almost dragging. Stunt coordinators hated the sagging because it changed the truck's handling. A truck that started the day with predictable dynamics would be wallowing like a boat by afternoon, making precision driving nearly impossible. Number 5, Rick's truck almost got its own fan club. The Power Wagon generated so much fan mail that the network considered merchandising it separately from the show. Viewers wrote thousands of letters asking for specifications, wanting to buy their own orange Dodges, requesting posters, and begging for model kit versions. The truck had its own following independent of the show itself. People who didn't even watch Simon & Simon regularly knew about Rick's truck. It became a cultural icon of early 80s television, as recognizable as Kit from Knight Rider, or the General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard. The production office had to create form letters just to respond to truck inquiries. They'd get technical questions they couldn't answer because even they didn't know which engine was in which truck on any given day. Dodge dealerships reported customers coming in asking for the Simon & Simon truck, not knowing it was a heavily modified 10-year-old model filled with television magic. Model companies approached the production about licensing official die-cast versions, but the legal departments couldn't figure out what exactly they'd be licensing since the truck was different in every episode. The merchandise that did get produced was hilariously inaccurate, usually based on one publicity photo that might not have even been a truck used in filming. Fan clubs devoted to Dodge Power Wagon still reference Rick's truck as the vehicle that made them fall in love with the model. Number 4. A few trucks were scrapped during filming. Not every Power Wagon survived its tour of duty on Simon & Simon. Hard stunt impacts, failed jumps, and spectacular crashes totaled several production vehicles over the show's run. These weren't minor fender benders. We're talking complete write-offs that went straight from the set to the salvage yard. One truck got T-boned so hard during an intersection stunt that it literally bent in half. The frame folded like a taco, making it impossible to repair. Another launched off a ramp wrong and landed nose first, crushing everything forward of the firewall. The engine ended up in the passenger compartment. The production kept these disasters quiet. They didn't want viewers knowing that creating Rick's adventures was destroying real trucks at an alarming rate. But the crew members have stories about trucks that didn't make it home. They'd salvage whatever parts they could, a tailgate here, a roll bar there, maybe some wheels if they survived. The rest became scrap metal. The worst part was when they totaled a hero truck by accident. These were the nicest vehicles with the best paint and complete interiors. Losing one meant scrambling to promote a backup truck to hero status, which meant rushed paint jobs and frantic parts swapping to match continuity. Number 3, the paint faded between seasons. That vibrant orange paint that made Rick's truck so iconic, it had the lifespan of a Hollywood romance. California sun is brutal on automotive paint, especially bright colors. Between seasons, the trucks would fade from bright orange to a pale salmon color that looked terrible on camera. The production would have to repaint the entire fleet between seasons, and sometimes mid-season if the fading got too obvious. But they could never quite match the original color. Each repaint shifted the shade slightly, creating a rainbow of oranges across the fleet. Season 1 orange was different from Season 2 orange, which was different from Season 3 orange. Die-hard fans can actually date episodes by the shade of Rick's truck. The painting process was a nightmare. They'd have to schedule it during production breaks, but there were never enough breaks, so they'd paint one truck while filming with another, then try to match the shots in editing. UV damage wasn't the only problem. Salt air from beach filming caused oxidation. Desert sand literally sandblasted the paint off. City smog etched into the clear coat. By the show's final season, maintaining that signature orange color was a full-time job for the paint department. Number 2, it became one of the show's trademarks. Rick's Power Wagon transcended being just a vehicle. It became as essential to Simon & Simon as the brothers themselves. The truck appeared in promotional materials, lunchboxes, posters, and became the show's visual shorthand. See an orange Dodge truck, think Simon & Simon. The network knew this. They'd specifically request the truck be featured in publicity shoots, even when it made no sense. Press photos might show the truck in locations that never appeared in the show, just because marketing wanted that orange truck in the shot. Writers started crafting episodes around the truck. It would get stolen, damaged, or modified, becoming the plot device that drove entire storylines. The truck was basically the third lead character. When the show ended, there were serious discussions about giving the truck its own spin-off. Not the characters, just the truck with new owners solving crimes. That's how iconic it had become. The idea died in development, but the fact they considered it shows the vehicle's star power. Even today, 40 years later, mention Simon & Simon to anyone who watched it, and they'll immediately picture that orange Power Wagon. It's burned into the collective memory of 80s television more than most human characters from the era. Number 1, surviving examples are extremely rare. Here's the heartbreaker for collectors and fans. Despite the multiple trucks used during production, confirmed screen-used Power Wagons are nearly impossible to find today. Most were destroyed during filming, scrapped after production, or disappeared into private collections with no documentation. The production didn't think to preserve them. This was before Hollywood memorabilia became valuable. When the show wrapped, the trucks were just used vehicles with hard lives. They sold them off cheap to crew members, auctioned them without documentation, or sent them to salvage. Today, maybe 2 or 3 trucks can be reliably traced back to the production. Even those are usually stunt trucks held together with wire and hope. The hero trucks, the ones that looked best on camera, seem to have vanished completely. Every few years, someone claims to have found Rick's truck in a barn or backyard. They'll post photos online of an orange Dodge truck, swearing it's the real deal. But without production documentation, build sheets, or verifiable provenance, it's just another orange truck. The few confirmed survivors are prized by collectors. They sell for insane amounts when they rarely come to market. We're talking 6 figures for a beat-up truck that might have appeared in background shots. The irony is perfect. A truck that was everywhere on television in the 80s is now almost impossible to find in reality. It's like Rick's Power Wagon drove off into the sunset and never came back. And there you have it, 20 facts about Rick's Power Wagon that prove television magic is equal parts creativity and chaos. That orange truck you thought you knew was really a fleet of imposters held together by Hollywood hope and hasty paint jobs. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Did you ever notice any of these inconsistencies while watching the show? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if you've ever spotted one of these legendary trucks in the wild. If you enjoyed this deep dive into television automotive history, hit that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets from your favorite classic shows. We'll see you next time when we uncover more Hollywood mysteries hiding in plain sight.